Following Scylla is the AMS's very own Mitchell Prost. Mitchell is a fifth-year undergraduate student here at UBC in the Faculty of Science, and currently Mitchell serves as the student housing coordinator for the AMS. And Mitchell's also been involved in a lot of conversations that we've been having in regards to the planning of a potential student co-op housing project. I also know that Mitchell's very involved with student life and then student residence as well. So Mitchell's just going to join us and give us the student perspective and anything else he has to share. About co-ops. Thanks, Mitchell. You can take over now.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Alrighty. So what I'm going to talk about in my time here is a little bit about the AMS housing service that we are developing, and also a little bit about the co-op opportunity that the Alma Mater Society has. So starting off, I want to give some historical context with the Student Society, what we've done in the past with off-campus housing support, which sort of includes co-op housing, finding housing, but then also legal support, rental rights, and a whole different host of issues that we want to address with our housing service. So in the past, there have been services operated by the Student Society to address student demand for off-campus housing support. The most notable is AMS Rentsline, which was an online database, and which even before that was sort of like a phone line you could call. It's changed a lot, but currently does not exist anymore. Around 2014, 2015, the AMS decided to instead shift its focus for off-campus housing supports and services to a more advocacy-based approach instead of offering in-house services. So that's a lot of work that the VP external team that Cal sits on has been working on and is currently working on. Within the institution, within UBC, at present, there is no service operating that focuses on supporting students with off-campus housing related issues. We of course have student housing, but that in itself presents a lot of different barriers in terms of affordability. It's quite expensive. And unfortunately, not everyone that might want to be on campus has the opportunity to be on campus. And there is a limit in terms of how flexible rates can be, and demand, of course, is quite high, but available units tend to be lower. So that leads a lot of people to not have the campus experience and not be on campus, which is something that I have had the ability to do, and something that I've found has really accentuated my university experience, and is something that I would want to see more people have the ability to have. Before 1993, the university used to operate a housing registry through the UBC Department of Housing and Conferences. It was accessible to students and staff alike. That sort of phased out to what the AMS used to operate. And then, of course, the AMS phased that out to focus more heavily on advocacy efforts regarding student housing. So the current state of where we're at now is less services towards housing and more advocacy. So these slides that I'm presenting you are tied in with a report that I did last term that sort of looked holistically at housing for students, including availability and the potential of co-ops, but also a lot of different issues that are related to housing that you can't really separate, such as homelessness, affordability, equity. So this gap analysis that I did sort of provides the context of why the next steps that we took were to create a housing service, and further from that, to look at the potential of having a student-run co-op through the Student Society or multiple student societies. So quickly, I'll highlight that within the AMS, the gaps that we had found that there are no service that centers around off-campus housing support for students. We do run a service called peer support. However, these volunteers are not specifically trained, nor have special resources aimed at supporting student-facing housing issues. Within the university, we do have lots of supports for students. Unfortunately, none of them are focused on off-campus housing needs. So unfortunately, there's no central location within the institution that students can go directly to looking for support regarding housing that's off campus. Outside of UBC, there are many excellent resources for the general public to access regarding housing. One of them that I'd like to highlight is this website that is basically a map of BC and pinpoints a whole bunch of different co-ops, which is really interesting, and I encourage people to explore that. I can share that perhaps during the Q&A session. I don't believe any of them are necessarily student focused. Some of them might be, but the majority of them are non-student focused. So that gap still exists within the co-op realm across BC. There are no super clear provincial supports for post-secondary students regarding housing. They're more general. And the amount of information can be overwhelming just from my own experience looking through all of the different websites and all of the different resources scattered across the internet for BC. There is no singular point of contact for students, especially not for students by students. So another part that I thought was really interesting to share was similar models at other institutions that looked at housing support for students. So the first one I'd like to highlight is the Concordia Student Union. They operate a service called CSU Off-Campus Housing and Job Resource Center, which is abbreviated as HOJO. And the really cool thing with their service is that they recently opened their first co-op program called the Woodnote. Khaled mentioned this, but I'll mention it a little bit later too. I do have some pictures in case you're interested in looking at what exactly their housing program looks like. But essentially, they have a whole department run by their student society that focuses on supporting students with their housing needs and questions, which I find is so helpful and so useful. In reading their reports that they have, it has been helpful and useful for students. The University of Bristol Student Union, they own a professionally run housing service geared towards supporting off-campus student housing. Again, a different style. This one is more professional run versus Concordia's, which is more student run. But the delivery is the same. They're providing support for students with off-campus housing needs, which is something that we don't have here at UBC. And I believe in some other explorations that I did with other student unions across BC, there seemed to be a lack of student-facing support for off-campus housing needs. And lastly, I'd like to highlight Western University. They offer professional services for student off-campus housing needs, as well as similar to the University of Bristol Student Union. So 3 different sort of styles of support for housing went into the explorations that we did for what the AMS could do. We also did some data collection. I won't bog everyone down with going too deep into it, but essentially it was quite clear that students were really interested in housing support, whatever that may be. This question that we asked here was how useful would you personally find a new AMS service that focused on addressing housing needs? And 33.5% found it extremely useful and 25.5% very useful. So there was quite a lot of individuals that expressed to us that this was something that they thought was really necessary to them as students. This sort of data that we collected split it down into what kind of services they would find most helpful. The most important one, according to students that we surveyed, was a database of rental postings. So just seeing what's available was really important. I think that really ties in closely with co-ops as well, because really the need is units, like a space to live. And the fact that so many people needed information on where to find places tells me that people need where they can go. And I think that rental units are great, but co-ops where you have a community of people who are, supporting you and governing the space that you live because they live there is something that would be important for students to have. So we did do a lot of student consultation. There are a couple of questions here that we asked. I won't go through all of them, but we really wanted to get to the bottom of what is it that students need? What are they struggling with? What issues are they facing? And how can we use all of that information to guide us in what we want to do with the housing service? Here is just a list of the different things that the service came up with and that we wanted to explore. So finding off-campus housing was really important to us. the transition from on-campus housing to off-campus housing was quite important, especially since these are usually students who are in their first year, going to their second year. There is a distinct lack of support moving from first year to second year that we wanted to address. Budgeting assistance, off-campus housing information, furniture and appliance rentals, and support for experience of acute homelessness were all important things that we found that we really wanted to address in the housing service moving forward. So I'll touch quickly upon where we currently are. So we are launching the housing service quite soon. We're looking at being a referral service at first, so students can come to us, ask questions. Really, we want to be a point of contact and a consolidator of information, because there, as I mentioned, is so much information across the internet in different places that we wanted to put together and provide to students. So that's what we currently want to do. I could see us in the future moving a lot further, but for now, we're starting with being a referral service, which is quite exciting. And the exciting thing, the really exciting thing, is the opportunity for co-ops. So let me just see what I have next. So part of our initial exploration in setting up the AMS housing service involved the potential for AMS co-op housing. So throughout all the surveys and data collection that we did, we recognized that the demand for affordable student housing, and we are currently taking the first steps in creating an AMS co-op housing program. So we, in thinking about how we wanted to do that, we explored a lot of different options. We looked at different institutions, and we really dived into the Concordia Student Union and their model as a student union that has created co-op housing through partnerships, not just on their own, but with different organizations and different student unions, and have actually completed their project and opened up their first co-op housing project in the Woodnote. And we were really inspired by that and wanted to learn more. So what we did is we actually reached out to UTIL, which is a company based in Quebec. We've been having very early conversations regarding potential student housing co-ops with UTIL. They are a Montreal-based organization dedicated to the development, study, and promotion of student housing as co-op initiatives within Quebec. So really centered around what we wanted to do and what we were looking for. We're currently looking at the creation of a feasibility study in partnership with UTIL to explore AMS student co-op housing. So this study, we hope, will explore a range of topics from feasibility, land availability, potential cost, location, and a lot more. So we're quite literally at the beginning stages, but I think these are the most exciting stages because we're learning about what is possible, what we can do, what we want to do, and looking at all these different potential avenues for collaboration, not just with the AMS and UTIL, but additionally with different student unions. So I want to quickly highlight the Woodnote, which was mentioned a bit earlier. This is sort of our dream, you could say, what we would love to see happen in the future. So Woodnote is a cooperative that is nonprofit in structure. It aims to facilitate access to affordable, inclusive, and democratically run housing for Concordia students within a community-focused lifestyle. This cooperative is responsible for every aspect of communal living within the building. Woodnote members don't need to worry about the minutiae of property management or building maintenance, thanks to the help of 2 other nonprofit organizations with expertise in social housing that support its mission of providing high quality and accessible housing for students. So really a collaborative environment where students have the ability to live in a space that is accessible to them, affordable, but also have a say in what happens in the place that they're living. And that really is achieved through their board of directors, which is an elected General Assembly and is comprised of 6 elected student representatives, members of the co-op, 1 expert in student housing from Concordia, 1 expert from the nonprofit UTIL, and 1 representative from the Montreal community. So you really have a diverse group of individuals with diverse experiences and are really focusing the experience on the students living in the co-op. And these are just some pictures of Woodnote in case you're interested in what they look like. I think they're pretty cool. The last thing I want to touch upon is that housing is very expensive in BC and land is even more expensive. At the level of an individual student union, building a co-op would be a tall order due to cost. One avenue of co-op development that the AMS would be really open to explore is a collaborative effort between multiple student unions and organizations around BC, creating a potential student housing co-op network of support. A potential model of governance could follow that of the Woodnote, with multiple students and staff tenants sitting on a board of directors, putting the power to those living in those areas. So as we develop our co-op initiatives, this is something that we're really looking to do. And I believe that's all that I have for my individual presentation. So I'll pass it back over to Michelle.